Though they currently account for 10% of the entire American workforce, nonprofit organizations are the fastest growing sector of our economy. Just because they don't set out to make money doesn't mean they don't make an impact, and not just on the economy. From feeding the hungry to fighting for immigrants and workers' rights, nonprofit organizations are part of the fabric of Brooklyn. So what would it mean if they're under stress?
Well, some foundations have taken the step of freezing discretionary spending to see just where and how they should be using their money. Now, will that money be used to make gains over the next 4 years, or just maintain the gains already made by these organizations? Here to help us navigate the 401c3 of it all is Joan Garry, a nonprofit consultant and the author of Joan Garry's Guide to Nonprofit Leadership. Welcome to BK Live, Joan.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Good. We're also happy to be joined by BRIC's own Director of Community Media, Mr. Anthony Riddle. Welcome back, sir.
Hey.
It's happy to see you at the table. And joining us via Skype is Jamie Bennett. He's the Executive Director of Art Place America. Thanks for joining us, Jamie.
Great to be here.
Joan, why don't we start with you? Can you give us a lay of the land on how nonprofits from both sides of the political aisle are being viewed in this Trump presidency?
Sure. It would not surprise you for me to use the word uncertain. And I think that on both sides of the aisle, nonprofits are feeling uncertainty. I think as the pendulum swings a little bit further, you're talking about pure, unadulterated panic, right? And but it's very interesting. You talked about the notion that nonprofits are under particular stress. Nonprofits are always under stress. Sort of my philosophy is that nonprofits are sort of hardwired in this very messy way, right? They have passion, they're under-resourced, they're overworked, they have a lot of volunteers, and this kind of hardwiring causes a great deal of stress. I think that since the election, folks on the left are not really clear about what opportunities are ahead for them. I mean, on the right. Many folks on the right are thinking, gee, some doors may be open to us that were previously locked and shut. And then on the left-hand side, you have people that are saying, uh-oh, right? And how do we best think about these next 4 years in a way that moves our mission forward?
So I want to go to you now on Skype, Jamie. We know that you're at the helm of Art Place right now, but you have a background working with the NEA as their chief of staff, so it's a non-political place to work. What are your colleagues, or what's your best idea about what they're thinking now in this time of transition?
Sure. So I think folks are a little up in the air about what the future of the NEA may be. The president is in the process of releasing his budget proposal. I think even as we speak, it was supposed to come across at 12 noon today. And I think most domestic agencies are expected to take rather significant cuts to pay for the 10% increase in defense spending. The one thing that I think is very specifically interesting for the National Endowment for the Arts that's been a little bit underreported is the fact that Karen Pence is herself an artist. So we actually have an artist inhabiting the Naval Observatory, and she's talked a lot about the partnership she's interested between arts and defense and arts and health and human services. So I think there is a fair amount of uncertainty, but all signs are certainly not negative.
So you think a little pillow talk with the number 2 guy could translate into nonprofits not getting squeezed as hard?
I think if we're speaking specifically about the arts, which the NEA does, there's also the fact that Mrs. DeVos, now that she's been confirmed as education secretary, is one of Michael Kaiser's largest patrons, and he now runs the DeVos Institute of Arts Management. He was a former head of the Kennedy Center. So I think there's definitely going to be a realignment of power, but again, I don't think all signs are necessarily negative.
So may I?
Before you do, I want to bring Tony into this, like this realignment of power. What do you think that could mean in an environment like the ones we're living in, where the president is saying that the press is the #1 enemy of the American people, when you're all about bringing voices and putting them to the front? What do you think that's going to mean for free speech in America?
Well, number one, I think this is a time where we're most needed, and so we need to really stand our ground, and I think that's the term that all of the nonprofit world and all of the people who help other people need to bear in mind. Stand your ground. defend the territory that you're on because you're needed. In our case, we're very much beholden to what happens in Congress and the FCC, so that, for instance, community media gets most of its funding and its channels because of franchise agreements and the long history of cable laws. But we now have an FCC chair in a Republican-dominated FCC who is, for instance, against net neutrality, which seems like the most basic of concepts. And you can expect that there's probably going to be more mergers and of large cable companies and telecommunications interests, which gives them greater power to fight down regulations that they don't like, the ones that help our communities. But, you know, again, in saying stand your ground, I think the most important concept to bear in mind is that there's two things that move politics. The first thing is money. If you got a lot of money, then you're self-organized. You're able to organize yourself. If you don't have money, you have to organize people. You have to organize people around the things that you're interested in. And actually, what we run here is a good way to help you organize. And I don't care one way or another which administration it is, but you should be able to use public access television resources to be able to deliver your services to the community in a better way, and also to be able to organize people around your organizations in order to make sure that they're politically protected.
Joan, you wanted to comment?
I do. I feel like there's something important missing from this conversation, which is about climate. Right? And you can talk about whether or not the NEA will fund or won't fund, and what the relationship is between Kaiser and DeVos all day long. And I think those are very important things to think about. But we have a very polarized climate, right? And that has real impact on real people's lives. So just like 5 minutes ago, breaking news, the JCCs, Jewish Community Centers, have just evacuated Staten Island, Long Island, and Tarrytown facilities amidst widespread bomb threats. Right? So you have created the climate has been created where both sides are so intensely motivated and, frankly, very angry. And so I also think, as nonprofit leaders, really need to be looking at a lot of different things, not the least of which is how to prepare themselves. There are a lot of people that are completely ginned up who want to get off the, sort of out of the stands and onto the field. Right. But not all of them want to do that in a productive way. And I think nonprofits that are not planning and thinking about strategies, and again, on both sides of the aisle, because everyone is polarized and furious.
So can we go to a second? I want to put this to you and Jamie specifically about people who do want to use their checkbooks and get out of those stands and get onto the field. So is this a moment where you shouldn't waste a good tragedy in the eyes of some folks who are organizing on the left?
So, a good CPA will tell you that assets equal liabilities, right? The same is true with challenges and opportunities. They're varying sides of the same coin, right? And so you have a kind of a crazy number of people that are up in those stands that are saying, I want on the field. Right. So it is incumbent upon the nonprofit sector, right, every single nonprofit to say, how can I utilize the voices and the skills and the expertise and the attributes of those people in the stands and say, come on down and play on my field. And that might be a checkbook. It might be a volunteer. It might be a boomer, right, who's stuck in neutral in their job and maybe wants to devote some kind of pro bono expertise. Right? All kinds of, right? And lots of folks, I think, are out there, either boomers in jobs where they're like, I want to do something, or now we even have a whole universe of people that have retired, who are ready to put their intellectual capital to work.
So, Jamie, does that mean that the dollar that might have been going to a place like Art Place is now going to be split between you and the ACLU and all of these other organizations that people see as activists instead of giving money to the arts that they would usually do?
Sure. So the one thing, if we were in a different segment, I might push back on a little is the dichotomy between art and activism, because I don't think that is a neat divide. The other thing that I will say is I think we're in a moment when both sides need to think very much about what are the immediate actions we need to take and what are our long-term strategies. So we work closely with 16 foundations, many of which went through a moment after the election of saying, oh, wait, does this change everything? What should we be doing now? And a number of them realized that no, the work that they'd been doing for the past 10, 20, 30 years was every bit as important.
Gotcha.
Working on housing, working on workforce development, working on climate change and environmental issues. And in addition to that, we also needed to make sure that people had the sort of rapid response to take advantage of both the crises and the opportunities that are being present. So I think it's really important to sort of, for individuals with their dollars, to think through how many of my dollars do I want to give to an immediate action and how many do I want to invest in a long-term strategy.
Gotcha.
And the secret is going to be that we need both.
So what about right-leaning nonprofits who may prefer smaller government? Will they have more trouble motivating the public?
I don't think anybody is having any trouble motivating anybody.
But they won. Like you think,
Right.
oh, we have our guy in, we've got the house that I got.
Right, but
so
then
we don't
now
need
these
to give
doors
money
are
away.
open, so let me in. And right now we can get some things done we couldn't get to before. So when are you going to sign up and be a member of the NRA? When are you going to sign up and become a major donor too? Right? So the doors are open to them in a way that they were not before. And I think that I think Jamie's making some really, really good points about short-term versus long-term.
Yeah.
I just finished working with a board this weekend in North Carolina. And you have to have a bit of a battle plan, kind of a war room strategy, depending on what your organization is doing. So in the case, and I totally agree with you, Jamie, that I think art and activism are also very, very intertwined.
Yeah.
I mean, we're here at BRIC. I mean, I think this is probably living proof that those things are co-located and integrated, right? But what I think is, what was interesting for me this weekend in talking with this board was that this board wants this organization to think bigger, right? There's going to be money out there, right? There's going to be money out there. You should be thinking bigger. You should be thinking about adding more staff, right? But this is a small organization that actually needs more staff to do what it does right now today. And so I think that there's this push and pull between, wow, if we get our story and our message out there in a really smart way, we can get some of that low-hanging fruit and really start to build engine resources and endowments. But you also have to just be mindful of the fact that these generally nonprofits are under-resourced to begin with. And when you layer on top of that the need for rapid response, or what I would call crisis management plans, there's quite a lot of places you could invest your money.
So Tony, looking at what Joan talked about earlier is this notion of climate and just the environment that we're in. I wonder if you are reminded by any other like historical time or like having the benefit of perspective to see when times may have been something approaching like this.
Okay, let me just say, life ain't been no crystal staircase in the first place. And so, when you look back and you think about, okay, let's talk about the school voucher system and sort of this dismantling of education as we've known it since Brown versus the Board of Education, because that's exactly what's happening right now. And so when you think of it in that way, when you think like as under-resourced as the black community was before Brown versus the Board of Education, somehow we produced a large number of scholars who were intensely interested in progress and human progress and trying to change things and so forth. And so in some ways that represents a model that we need to look at for nonprofits as well. It's good to be able to get government funding. I think there should be more funding for the NEA, for instance. I don't think that it's just throwaway money. But on the other hand, you've got to integrate yourself with the people. You've got to make it so that your organization is serving the needs of the community in a way that the community values you. And then in that way, you gain a strength that you wouldn't have if you were dependent on which administration's in.
Remember, too, that when you're talking about nonprofits, you're not just talking about advocacy, you're not just talking about arts, you're not just talking about direct service, you're also talking about schools, you're talking about hospitals, you're talking about houses of worship. right? That 11 million that you represent, that you talk about, that reflects, I mean, this is the bedrock of our society. And we really have to be thinking about what is the kind of impact an administration that sends all kinds of signals of one sort or another, seemingly via tweet every 5 minutes, like what does that mean for all of those institutions?
So we're going to kick it to you one time for a final thought before we get out of here, Jamie.
I couldn't agree more with what Anthony and Joan have been saying, and I think this is a moment for each of us to both reaffirm what our core values are, our core work going forward, and to think about the philosophical distinction about what should be government funded and what should be the role of nonprofits. And I think the next 4 years are going to see a realigning of that, and it's important that we all stay wildly active in that conversation.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Jamie. And Joan, thank you very much for being here. Anthony Riddle, the respected boss around here, very much for being here. What an excellent panel. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent job. Thank you.